Eleanor lived a quiet life. Her home, nestled deep in a snowy part of the United States, was her sanctuary. It stood sturdy and well kept, a testament to years of careful living. She was a widow, her days marked by routine and the comforting presence of memories. Her late husband, George, had been a big wrestling fan. She could still hear his booming laugh from the living room, watching matches on their old television. Sometimes she'd sit in his favorite armchair, running her hand over the worn fabric, and just remember, their life together had been simple, full of small joys, and their home reflected that. Every creak of the floorboards, every faded photograph on the mantelpiece held a story. It wasn't just a house. It was a warm, welcoming space, a keeper of shared history. The news had been talking about it for days. A massive blizzard was coming. The kind that didn't just dump snow, but shut everything down. They called it unprecedented, urging everyone to stay inside. Eleanor, though, wasn't one to be caught off guard. She'd lived through enough winters to know better. Weeks ago, she'd already stocked her pantry with canned goods, dried fruits, and enough coffee to last a month. Her firewood pile was neatly stacked by the back door, covered with a tarp, ready for the chill. She walked through her home, checking the windows, making sure they were latched tight against the coming wind. She pulled extra blankets from the linen closet just in case, and made sure her battery-powered radio was working. Being self-sufficient wasn't just a habit. It was a way of life up here. She knew how to take care of herself, and her home was always prepared. Meanwhile, in a city not too far away, a huge WWE event was supposed to happen. Thousands of people were headed there, excited to see their favorite wrestlers. The superstars themselves, along with their crews, were already in town or on their way. They were used to traveling, to performing in different cities every week. But this storm, it was different. It hit fast, much faster and harder than anyone expected. The snow started falling, thick and relentless, turning the roads into icy, impassable messes. Flights were grounded, trains stopped running, hotels filled up, but many were still caught out in the open. The superstars, these larger-than-life figures, found themselves stuck, just like everyone else, with nowhere to go and the blizzard closing in around them. The blizzard struck with a vengeance. Eleanor's house, usually so peaceful, now felt like it was in the middle of a roaring beast. Snow piled up against the windows, making the world outside a blurry white. The wind howled, a deep, mournful sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. Inside, the power flickered, once, twice, and then plunged everything into darkness. Eleanor, calm as ever, lit a few oil lamps and stoked the fire in the hearth. The crackling flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, providing a comforting warmth against the growing chill. The storm's intensity created an eerie silence, broken only by the wind, making her feel even more isolated than usual. She was just about to settle down with a book when a loud, insistent knocking cut through the storm's roar. Eleanor froze. A knock? Out here? In this weather? Her home was remote, far from any main road. She rarely had visitors, especially not in the middle of a blizzard. A flicker of worry, then curiosity, pushed her toward the door. She looked through the peephole, but all she could see was a wall of white. Hesitantly, she unlatched the heavy wooden door, pulling it open just a crack. Standing on her porch, covered in snow from head to toe, were not one, but 10 massive figures. They were huge, impossibly tall and broad. Even under layers of winter gear and thick snow, she recognized them. Their faces, though grimed with snow and looking tired, were familiar from George's wrestling shows. These were WWE superstars, standing on her doorstep, shivering in the brutal cold. They looked lost, desperate for shelter. Eleanor stared for a moment, her mind trying to process what she was seeing. 10 wrestling superstars. At her house in the middle of a blizzard. It was an unbelievable sight. Her first thought was of her quiet solitude, her peaceful evening. But then she saw their faces, etched with cold and worry. Their sheer size, usually intimidating, now just made them look more vulnerable. Her inherent kindness, a trait George had always loved about her, took over. She couldn't leave anyone out in this, not even 10 giants from television. They needed warmth. They needed safety. The thought of them freezing out there made her chest ache. She took a deep breath, pushing aside her surprise and her love for quiet. Her home, she decided, was big enough for a few more. She looked at the leader, a man whose face she recognized as one of the champions, and nodded slowly. "Come in," she said, her voice a little shaky but firm. "Come in, out of the cold." The blizzard struck with a vengeance. Eleanor's house, usually so peaceful, now felt like it was in the middle of a roaring beast. Snow piled up against the windows, making the world outside a blurry white. The wind howled, a deep, mournful sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. Inside, the power flickered, once, twice, and then plunged everything into darkness. Eleanor, calm as ever, lit a few oil lamps and stoked the fire in the hearth. The crackling flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, providing a comforting warmth against the growing chill. The storm's intensity created an eerie silence, broken only by the wind, making her feel even more isolated than usual. She was just about to settle down with a book when a loud, insistent knocking cut through the storm's roar. Eleanor froze. A knock? Out here? In this weather? Her home was remote, far from any main road. She rarely had visitors, especially not in the middle of a blizzard. A flicker of worry, then curiosity, pushed her toward the door. She looked through the peephole, but all she could see was a wall of white. Hesitantly, she unlatched the heavy wooden door, pulling it open just a crack. Standing on her porch, covered in snow from head to toe, were not 1, but 10 massive figures. They were huge, impossibly tall and broad. Even under layers of winter gear and thick snow, she recognized them. Their faces, though grimed with snow and looking tired, were familiar from George's wrestling shows. These were WWE superstars, standing on her doorstep, shivering in the brutal cold. They looked lost, desperate for shelter. Eleanor stared for a moment, her mind trying to process what she was seeing. 10 wrestling superstars, at her house in the middle of a blizzard. It was an unbelievable sight. Her first thought was of her quiet solitude, her peaceful evening. But then she saw their faces, etched with cold and worry. Their sheer size, usually intimidating, now just made them look more vulnerable. Her inherent kindness, a trait George had always loved about her, took over. She couldn't leave anyone out in this, not even 10 giants from television. They needed warmth. They needed safety. The thought of them freezing out there made her chest ache. She took a deep breath, pushing aside her surprise and her love for quiet. Her home, she decided, was big enough for a few more. She looked at the leader, a man whose face she recognized as one of the champions, and nodded slowly. "Come in," she said, her voice a little shaky, but firm. "Come in. Out of the cold." The superstars, their faces a mix of relief and disbelief, shuffled inside, bringing with them a gust of icy air and melting snow. They started to shed layers of heavy coats and hats, revealing their impressive physiques. Wet footprints spread across her clean entryway, but Eleanor didn't mind. The important thing was that they were safe, out of the vicious storm. "Thank you, ma'am," one of them rumbled, his voice deep but gentle. "We didn't know what we were going to do. Our bus broke down miles back and our phones died." Eleanor simply waved a hand. "Don't just stand there, dear. Get closer to the fire. You must be frozen." She gestured towards the large stone fireplace, where the flames danced merrily. The superstars, still looking a bit stunned, moved slowly, almost awkwardly, into her living room. They towered over her antique furniture, making the cozy space feel even smaller. Their eyes, though, held a genuine gratitude that Eleanor couldn't ignore. She watched them, a small smile playing on her lips. They were so big, so imposing, yet right now they looked like lost puppies. Their wrestling personas, all bravado and confidence, were gone, replaced by tired, cold men. She offered them thick wool blankets from a cedar chest, and they wrapped themselves up, huddling near the fire. The room, usually so quiet, was now filled with the shuffling of large boots, the quiet murmurs of conversation, and the steady crackle of the fire. Eleanor went to the kitchen, retrieving a large thermos of hot tea she had prepared earlier, and a plate of her homemade shortbread cookies. She brought them out, setting them on the coffee table. "Here, this will warm you up," she said, pouring steaming tea into mugs. The superstars gratefully accepted, their large hands dwarfing the delicate porcelain cups. They ate the cookies with an almost childlike eagerness, praising her baking. As they slowly warmed up, the initial shock on both sides began to fade. The superstars started to look around, taking in the details of her home. The framed photos of George and her, the collection of antique thimbles, the worn but comfortable armchair by the window. It was a stark contrast to the arenas and hotel rooms they were used to. One of them, a man with a distinct scar above his eyebrow, pointed to a small framed photo on the mantelpiece. It was a picture of George, younger, with a wide, happy grin, wearing a wrestling t-shirt. "Is that George?" he asked, a hint of recognition in his voice. Eleanor nodded. "My husband. He loved wrestling. He would have been absolutely thrilled to have you all here." A pang of sadness hit her, but it was quickly replaced by a quiet joy. George would have had a field day. He would have asked them a million questions, probably tried to get them to demonstrate a move or two. The superstars exchanged glances. They had heard of George, a legendary fan in certain circles, known for his passionate letters to the wrestling companies. They saw the sparkle in Eleanor's eyes as she spoke of him, and they understood. This was more than just a place to get out of the cold. It was a home filled with history, love, and a connection to their world. Despite the chaos outside, a strange sense of calm settled in the living room. Eleanor, who had always valued her solitude, found herself enjoying the unexpected company. Their presence, though initially jarring, was now a comforting shield against the storm's fury. She looked at these 10 giants, huddled around her fire, and a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the flames. It was the warmth of human connection, of shared vulnerability, and of a simple act of kindness in the face of overwhelming odds. She knew it would be a long night, but she also knew she wouldn't be alone. And for the first time in a long time, that felt good. Eleanor invited the superstars further inside, gesturing towards the worn, comfortable armchairs and the large rug in front of the crackling fireplace. She watched as their massive forms filled her small living room, making the cozy space feel even smaller. Their eyes, though, held a genuine gratitude that Eleanor couldn't ignore. She watched them, a small smile playing on her lips. They were so big, so imposing, yet right now they looked like lost puppies. Their wrestling personas, all bravado and confidence, were gone, replaced by tired, cold men. She offered them thick wool blankets from a cedar chest, and they wrapped themselves up, huddling near the fire. The room, usually so quiet, was now filled with the shuffling of large boots, the quiet murmurs of conversation, and the steady crackle of the fire. Eleanor went to the kitchen, retrieving a large thermos of hot tea she had prepared earlier, and a plate of her homemade shortbread cookies. She brought them out, setting them on the coffee table. "Here, this will warm you up," she said, pouring steaming tea into mugs. The superstars gratefully accepted, their large hands dwarfing the delicate porcelain cups. They ate the cookies with an almost childlike eagerness, praising her baking. As they slowly warmed up, the initial shock on both sides began to fade. The superstar started to look around, taking in the details of her home, the framed photos of George and her, the collection of antique thimbles, the worn but comfortable armchair by the window. It was a stark contrast to the arenas and hotel rooms they were used to. One of them, a man with a distinct scar above his eyebrow, pointed to a small framed photo on the mantelpiece. It was a picture of George, younger, with a wide, happy grin, wearing a wrestling t-shirt. "Is that George?" he asked, a hint of recognition in his voice. Eleanor nodded. "My husband. He loved wrestling. He would have been absolutely thrilled to have you all here." A pang of sadness hit her, but it was quickly replaced by a quiet joy. George would have had a field day. He would have asked them a million questions, probably tried to get them to demonstrate a move or two. The superstars exchanged glances. They had heard of George, a legendary fan in certain circles, known for his passionate letters to the wrestling companies. They saw the sparkle in Eleanor's eyes as she spoke of him, and they understood. This was more than just a place to get out of the cold. It was a home filled with history, love, and a connection to their world. Despite the chaos outside, a strange sense of calm settled in the living room. Eleanor, who had always valued her solitude, found herself enjoying the unexpected company. Their presence, though initially jarring, was now a comforting shield against the storm's fury. She looked at these 10 giants, huddled around her fire, and a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the flames. It was the warmth of human connection, of shared vulnerability, and of a simple act of kindness in the face of overwhelming odds. She knew it would be a long night, but she also knew she wouldn't be alone. And for the first time in a long time, that felt good. The superstars, used to the sterile environments of hotels and arenas, found Eleanor's home a peculiar but welcoming contrast. The rustic charm, the scent of wood smoke, and the quiet ticking of the grandfather clock were far from their usual world. They were big men, but they moved with surprising care, trying not to bump into anything in the relatively small space. They looked around with genuine interest, some pointing out old books on the shelves, others admiring the intricate needlework on a cushion. It was clear this was a real home, lived in and loved, not just a temporary stop. One of them, a younger man with bright blue eyes, noticed Eleanor struggling to lift a heavy log for the fire. Without a word, he stepped forward, easily taking the log from her and placing it gently onto the embers. Another one, seeing the snow piling up against the back door, offered to try and clear it, even though it was still snowing heavily. Eleanor, initially hesitant to accept help, found herself nodding realizing their sincerity. They weren't just guests, they were trying to be useful, to contribute, in a way that surprised and touched her. They helped her bring in more firewood from the small shed outside, their powerful arms making light work of the task. They cleared the snow from the porch, even though it was a losing battle against the blizzard. Eleanor watched them, a quiet smile on her face. These were the men who threw each other around in rings, who roared at crowds of thousands. But here, in her home, they were simply polite, helpful young men. She saw past their stage personas, past the muscles and the bravado, to the genuine good nature beneath. They were respectful, almost shy in her presence, and it was a side of them she never expected to see. As the hours passed and the storm showed no sign of letting up, they started to talk more. Eleanor, emboldened by their easygoing manner, began to share stories of her life with George. She spoke of his passion for wrestling, how he would record every match, analyze every move, and sometimes even write letters to the wrestlers themselves, offering advice or encouragement. She described their quiet life together, the garden they tended, the trips they took, the simple joys that filled their days. The superstars listened intently, occasionally asking questions, their faces softened by the firelight. Then it was their turn. They shared anecdotes from their travels, the funny mishaps on the road, the challenges of their careers, and the bond they shared as a wrestling family. They talked about the dedication it took, the injuries, the constant travel, but also the thrill of performing for a live crowd, the roar of the fans, the camaraderie backstage. They spoke of missing their own families, isolated by the storm, and a quiet sadness settled in the room for a moment. Eleanor found herself laughing at their stories, even shedding a tear or two at the more poignant ones. She saw their faces light up as they spoke of their passions, their eyes gleaming with a mix of exhaustion and excitement. It was a strange mix of worlds, her quiet domestic life and their loud public one, but in the warmth of her living room, under the relentless assault of the blizzard, they found common ground. A sense of camaraderie grew, slowly bridging the gap between their vastly different lives. They were no longer just a group of stranded wrestlers and an elderly widow. They were people sharing a moment, finding comfort in each other's presence. One of the superstars, a particularly gentle giant named Mark, offered to make more tea, having seen Eleanor's routine earlier. Another, seemingly the leader of the group, a man with a commanding but kind presence, asked if he could help her organize the pantry, noticing it was a bit cluttered. Eleanor, initially reluctant to have them fuss over her, found herself accepting their offers. It felt good to have company, to have people around who wanted to help, who genuinely cared. She realized how much she had missed this kind of interaction since George passed. The storm outside raged on, a wild beast howling at the windows. But inside, a quiet warmth had settled. The unfamiliar, rustic setting that had initially surprised the superstars now felt like a refuge. They were no longer just trying to make themselves useful. They were truly becoming part of the home, even if just for one night. Eleanor, in turn, found a renewed sense of purpose. She was not just a lonely old woman. She was a hostess, a storyteller, a provider of comfort and warmth. The bond forming between them was subtle but strong, a testament to the power of human connection in the most unexpected circumstances. She looked at their faces, illuminated by the dancing flames, and felt a quiet happiness she hadn't experienced in a very long time. The night would be long, but it would be shared. Reluctant to have them fuss over her, found herself accepting their offers. It felt good to have company, to have people around who wanted to help, who genuinely cared. She realized how much she had missed this kind of interaction since George passed. The storm outside raged on, a wild beast howling at the windows, but inside, a quiet warmth had settled. The unfamiliar, rustic setting that had initially surprised the superstars now felt like a refuge. They were no longer just trying to make themselves useful. They were truly becoming part of the home, even if just for one night. Eleanor, in turn, found a renewed sense of purpose. She was not just a lonely old woman. She was a hostess, a storyteller, a provider of comfort and warmth. The bond forming between them was subtle but strong, a testament to the power of human connection in the most unexpected circumstances. She looked at their faces, illuminated by the dancing flames, and felt a quiet happiness she hadn't experienced in a very long time. The night would be long, but it would be shared. As the night wore on, the reality of their situation started to press in. Eleanor's home, while cozy, was not designed for 12 people. Her pantry, usually well stocked for one, was quickly showing the strain of feeding 10 large, hungry men. She had laid out everything she had: canned soups, dried fruit, some bread she'd baked earlier in the week, and plenty of coffee and tea. The superstars, noticing her quiet concern, immediately stepped in. They had a quick, hushed conversation among themselves, and then the man Eleanor thought of as their leader, a tall wrestler with a kind face, approached her. "Eleanor," he said, his voice soft but firm, "we really appreciate everything you're doing, but we don't want to use up all your supplies. We're used to roughing it, honestly. Just give us whatever you can spare, and we'll make it work." Another wrestler, a younger man named Chad, chimed in. "Yeah, we can take turns with the sleeping arrangements. Some of us can sleep on the floor. We've done worse in some of those cheap motels on the road." Eleanor, touched by their thoughtfulness, still worried. "But you're big men," she fretted. "You need proper food, a proper bed." "Eleanor," Mark, the gentle giant, said, "the warmest place in this house is next to that fire, and we're all lucky to have it. Don't you worry about us." They started improvising. One of them found an old sleeping bag in the utility closet. Another pulled some blankets from a guest room. They arranged themselves around the living room, some leaning against the walls, others stretched out on the rug near the fireplace. They created a sort of human puzzle, fitting their large frames into the limited space. Eleanor watched them, a small smile playing on her lips. They were resourceful, she had to admit. The blizzard outside continued its relentless assault. The wind howled, rattling the windows, and the house groaned under the weight of the snow. The power had been out for hours, and the silence, broken only by the storm and the crackling fire, was profound. In this isolation, away from the roaring crowds, the bright lights, and the constant travel, the superstars seemed to shed their public personas. They became simply men, worried about the storm, about their families, about the uncertainty of their situation. Chad, the younger wrestler, confessed he was worried about his wife, who was expecting their first child. "She's due next month," he mumbled, staring into the fire. "I just hope she's okay, that the power's not out where she is." Another, a muscular man with a serious demeanor, admitted he often felt lonely on the road, despite being surrounded by people. "It's different when you're not home," he said quietly. "You miss the simple things." Eleanor listened, her heart aching for them. She understood that kind of worry, that kind of loneliness. She remembered nights when George was away on a business trip, and she'd felt the same quiet anxiety. She shared her own fears, too. "It gets very quiet here, sometimes," she admitted, "especially since George passed. The storms can be isolating. You start to feel very small in a big world." Her words hung in the air, a shared understanding passing between them. The superstars, known for their toughness, their staged bravado, were now just people facing a harsh night, finding comfort in the quiet honesty of a stranger. They nodded, their faces softened by the firelight, their usual expressions of strength replaced by something more vulnerable, more human. The shared adversity was doing something to them, weaving them together in a way that their professional lives never could. Despite the chaos outside, a strange sense of family began to form within Eleanor's small house. Laughter, quiet at first, then growing louder, filled the rooms. They told more stories, some funny, some touching. They talked about their childhoods, their dreams, their struggles. Mark, the gentle giant, started humming an old folk song, and soon a few others joined in, their deep voices blending in a surprisingly harmonious way. Eleanor watched them, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. She saw their genuine good nature, their respect, their kindness. These were not just the larger-than-life figures she'd seen on George's wrestling tapes. They were good men, caught in a bad situation, and they had found their way to her doorstep. Her home, which had felt so empty for so long, was now filled with life, with voices, with a shared human connection that made the raging blizzard outside seem a little less threatening. She felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just weathering the storm alone. She was providing a haven, a place of safety and warmth for these unexpected guests. The thought brought a small, contented sigh to her lips. She had worried about her limited supplies, about the lack of space, about the inconvenience. But all those worries faded in the face of the genuine camaraderie that had blossomed. This night, despite its challenges, was turning into something truly special. She knew it would be a night she would never forget, a night where she found companionship in the most unlikely of places. The shared moments, the laughter, the quiet confessions, all contributed to a growing bond, making the small house feel like a refuge, not just from the storm, but from loneliness itself. The night would be long, but it was a night of unexpected connection. The first hint of dawn, a faint gray light, finally pushed through the thick curtains of snow. The howling wind had died down to a whisper, and the relentless drumming of ice against the windows had stopped. Eleanor stirred from her makeshift bed on the sofa, her old bones protesting slightly, but her mind was alert. She looked around at the sleeping figures, sprawled on rugs, cushions, and even a couple of them curled up in oversized armchairs. The fire in the hearth had dwindled to glowing embers, casting a soft, flickering light on their faces. A profound quiet had settled over the house, a stark contrast to the storm's fury just hours before. The blizzard had finally broken. A sense of relief washed over her, a deep breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The immediate danger was over. The superstars, those powerful men who had seemed so imposing the night before, now looked like tired, overgrown children, their expressions peaceful in sleep. One of them, the one they called Roman, shifted, his eyes fluttering open. He blinked, taking in the quiet room, then met Eleanor's gaze. A small, grateful smile touched his lips. Soon, others began to stir. The initial grogginess quickly gave way to a shared sense of wonder at the silence outside. They peered through the windows, their breath fogging the glass at a world transformed. Snow lay in drifts much higher than they had imagined, pristine and untouched. The trees were heavy with it, their branches bowed low. It was a beautiful, almost magical sight, but it also highlighted the isolation. As they slowly gathered themselves, stretching and rubbing sleep from their eyes, the talk turned to departure. They needed to check on their families, their colleagues, and figure out how to get back to their lives. The roads would still be bad, but at least the storm was no longer actively raging. They began to gather their few belongings, the jackets and bags they had brought in with them. One by one, they came to Eleanor, their gratitude evident in their faces and voices. Mark, the gentle giant, knelt down beside her chair, his large hand gently covering hers. "Eleanor," he said, his voice deep and sincere, "we can't thank you enough. You saved us last night. You really did." Another, a younger man with bright eyes, added, "Seriously, ma'am, we would have been in real trouble out there. You're a lifesaver." They offered to help clean up, to shovel snow, to do anything she needed. They even talked about repaying her for the food, the warmth, the shelter. Eleanor, however, waved away their offers with a soft smile. "Nonsense," she said, her voice a little husky with emotion. "It was my pleasure, truly. I haven't had so much company in years. It was a wonderful night." She looked at each of them, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "Just get home safe, all of you. That's all the thanks I need." They insisted on at least helping her clear a path to the front door. With their combined strength, they made quick work of the deep snow, carving a tunnel-like path from her porch to where the driveway disappeared under a massive drift. It was a small gesture, but it meant a lot. Finally, with heartfelt goodbyes and promises to somehow stay in touch, though Eleanor doubted they ever would, given their busy lives, the 10 superstars began their trek. They walked single file, their powerful forms making dark shapes against the bright snow, heading towards the main road, hoping to find a way out of the white landscape. Eleanor stood on her porch, wrapped in a thick shawl, watching them go. She waved until they were just specks in the distance, then until they disappeared entirely behind a bend in the road. The house, which had been so full of life, laughter, and booming voices just moments before, now felt incredibly empty. The quiet returned, deeper and more profound than before. The scent of wood smoke and coffee still lingered, a faint echo of the night's unexpected camaraderie. Eleanor walked back inside, her steps slow. She ran her hand over the back of the sofa where one of them had slept, then touched the cold hearth. A mix of wistfulness and warmth filled her. Her home was back to its quiet solitude, but it was no longer the same. It was now filled with new memories, with the echoes of shared stories and genuine human connection. The blizzard had brought not just cold and isolation, but also an extraordinary, unexpected gift. She reflected on the events of the past night, the sheer improbability of it all. 10 WWE superstars in her small, remote house. It felt like a dream. She made herself a fresh cup of tea, the silence feeling different now, not so much lonely as simply peaceful. She looked out at the pristine, snow-covered world, a slight smile playing on her lips. She had done a good thing, and in doing so, she had received something precious in return. A reminder that even in the quietest corners of the world, connection and kindness could find a way to bloom. The superstars were gone, but their presence lingered, a warm glow in the heart of her home. Her life, once predictable and solitary, now held a new, unexpected chapter. She felt changed, subtly but certainly, by the extraordinary events of that blizzard night. The superstars, Once they finally made it through the deep snow and reached a town with working cell service, wasted no time. Their phones buzzed with messages and calls, and the first thing each of them did was reach out to their families, letting them know they were safe. After that, almost in unison, they started sharing their story. It was too unbelievable, too heartwarming, not to tell. They spoke to their colleagues, to their agents, to the WWE organization itself. The details poured out: the raging blizzard, being stranded, the desperate knock on a stranger's door, and then Eleanor. They described her small warm house, the crackling fire, the hot mugs of tea, and the simple comforting food she had shared without a second thought. They talked about her calm demeanor, her quiet strength, and how she had treated them not as famous athletes, but as tired, cold, and hungry men. Each superstar recounted their own experience, emphasizing her immense kindness and the life-saving sanctuary she had provided. They talked about how she had listened to their stories, how she had joked with them, and how she had made them feel like they were home, even if just for a night. Their emotional recounting highlighted the profound impact Eleanor had on them, turning a terrifying ordeal into a surprisingly beautiful memory. They weren't just telling a story. They were sharing a piece of their heart, still warmed by her generosity. The story, as these things often do, spread like wildfire within the close-knit WWE community. It wasn't just the 10 who were there. It was their friends, their trainers, their managers, the production crew, and even other superstars who had been stranded in different locations. Everyone heard about Eleanor, the elderly widow who had opened her home to a group of giants in their time of need. Other superstars, hearing of Eleanor's generosity, were deeply moved and inspired. They imagined themselves in that same desperate situation, and they understood the magnitude of her compassion. They knew the grueling travel, the loneliness of the road, and the unexpected dangers that could arise. Her act of kindness resonated deeply with a community that often felt isolated despite its global fame. There was a collective sense of gratitude, a desire to acknowledge her compassion in a way that truly fit the scale of her actions. It wasn't enough to just send a thank you card or a gift basket. Eleanor had saved them, not just from the cold, but from despair. She had shown them a level of human kindness that felt rare and precious. The buzz grew, moving beyond just the superstars who had stayed with her. The entire organization, from the top executives to the newest recruits, heard the tale and felt its pull. They felt a responsibility, a shared feeling that something big needed to be done for this remarkable woman. Inspired by the first-hand accounts, the WWE organization and its superstars decided to orchestrate a massive, heartfelt thank you. This wouldn't be a small, private gesture. This needed to be grand, a public display of appreciation that mirrored the extraordinary nature of Eleanor's kindness. Meetings were held, plans were drawn up, and a secret operation began to take shape. They started coordinating a surprise visit, involving not just the original 10, but hundreds of superstars, as many as they could gather. Logistics were a nightmare, especially with the lingering effects of the blizzard, but the determination was immense. They had to figure out how to get so many people, many of whom were still scattered across the region, to Eleanor's remote home without her knowing. It was like planning a military operation, but instead of weapons, their arsenal was gratitude. Managers cleared schedules, travel arrangements were made, and everyone who heard about it wanted to be a part of it. The planning was kept a tight secret from Eleanor. They wanted her reaction to be genuine, a pure moment of surprise and joy. The superstars who had stayed with her were particularly invested. They guided the organizers, describing her house, its location, and the best way to approach it. They spoke about her love for her late husband, her quiet life, and how this gesture would mean the world to her. They wanted to make sure every detail was perfect, a tribute worthy of her spirit. The idea grew from a simple thank you into something much larger, a testament to the power of human connection and the unexpected bonds forged in adversity. This wasn't just about one woman. It was about showing the world that kindness still existed, that even the toughest individuals could be softened by a gentle heart. The anticipation for the grand reveal built with each passing day, a quiet hum of excitement and purpose spreading through the WWE ranks. They were ready to show Eleanor just how much her simple act had meant to them all. Eleanor woke up to another quiet morning, the kind she had known for decades. The sun, bright and crisp, streamed through her kitchen window, reflecting off the pristine snow outside. The blizzard was a memory now, a dramatic interlude in her otherwise predictable life. She made her usual pot of coffee, the aroma filling her small, cozy home, and sat down at the kitchen table, looking out at the winter wonderland. The world seemed to sparkle, fresh and new after the storm. She thought about the superstars, those giant men who had filled her house with their booming voices and gentle manners. It felt like a dream, almost unreal, that they had been there, sharing her space, her food, her stories. She had gone back to her routine, but something had shifted inside her. The house, usually a comforting sanctuary, now felt a little too quiet, a little too empty. She missed the unexpected laughter, the deep conversations, the sheer presence of so many people. She found herself smiling at random moments, remembering a funny story one of them had told, or the way another had carefully helped her carry firewood. Her perspective on life had subtly changed. She realized how much she had enjoyed the companionship, the feeling of being needed, of having her quiet world turned upside down even for just a short time. It had been an adventure, a reminder that life still held surprises, even for an old woman like her. She was just finishing her second cup of coffee when she heard it. A faint, low rumble, like distant thunder, but steady, growing louder. It wasn't a sound she recognized. Her isolated home rarely heard anything more than the wind or the occasional snowplow. She paused, listening intently, her brow furrowed in curiosity. The rumble grew, becoming a distinct, rhythmic thudding, accompanied by a faint, almost imperceptible murmur of voices. It sounded like a large engine, or many engines, moving slowly. Eleanor walked to her living room window, pulling back the curtain. Her eyes widened, and her hand flew to her mouth, a gasp escaping her lips. What she saw was so utterly surreal, so completely unexpected, that for a moment she thought she was still dreaming. Coming down the long, winding road that led to her house, stretching as far as she could see, was a line of people. Not just a few, but hundreds, perhaps even more. They were marching through the snow, a slow, steady procession, their figures growing clearer with each passing moment. And as they got closer, she recognized them. Their imposing physiques, their familiar faces, some she had seen on television, others she had just spent a night with. It was the WWE. Hundreds of superstars, men and women, dressed in their various wrestling gear, winter coats, and even some in their signature stage attire, were making their way through the pristine white landscape. They moved with a shared purpose, a quiet determination that was both awe-inspiring and slightly terrifying. The distant murmur she had heard was now a low hum of chatter, the crunch of boots on snow, and a few scattered cheers. It looked like an army, but an army of gratitude. Leading the charge were the 10 superstars she had sheltered. She recognized their faces immediately. The big one, the one with the kind eyes, the one who had helped with the fire. They were at the front, their expressions a mix of serious resolve and beaming smiles. Behind them, stretching back for what seemed like miles, were hundreds more. She saw familiar faces from posters her late husband used to have, faces she had only ever seen on a screen. They carried banners, some with hand-painted messages, others with the WWE logo, proclaiming gratitude, respect, and thanks. The sight was so grand, so overwhelming, that Eleanor felt a lump form in her throat. Her eyes welled up with tears, not of sadness, but of pure, unadulterated shock and emotion. The procession stopped a respectful distance from her house, forming a vast semicircle in the snow-covered yard. The silence that fell was profound, broken only by the soft whistling of the wind and the occasional shuffle of feet. Then, one of the superstars she had hosted, a man with a booming voice she now recognized, stepped forward. His expression was earnest, his eyes shining with emotion. "Eleanor," he began, his voice carrying clearly across the snow. "We're here. All of us. We're here because of you." He gestured to the hundreds behind him, a sea of powerful athletic figures standing in silent homage. "What you did for us that night, it wasn't just about giving us shelter from a storm. It was about kindness. It was about humanity. It was about showing us that even when things are at their worst, there's always good in the world." Another one of the original 10 stepped forward, his voice softer, but equally heartfelt. "You opened your home, your heart, and you asked for nothing in return. You treated us like family, and we, the entire WWE family, want to thank you." As he spoke, the crowd behind him began to cheer, a low, rumbling wave of appreciation that built into a roar. They clapped, they stomped their feet in the snow, and they chanted her name. "Eleanor! Eleanor! Eleanor!" The sound was deafening, yet incredibly moving. Eleanor stood on her porch, wrapped in her old woolen shawl, tears streaming down her face. She was completely speechless, her mind struggling to process the enormity of the moment. Hundreds of the world's toughest athletes, standing in the snow, chanting her name, all because she had simply done what she felt was right. It was the most incredible, humbling, and overwhelming display of gratitude she had ever witnessed. Her simple act of kindness, born out of a desire to help others, had blossomed into this magnificent, almost unbelievable spectacle. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling of connection and belonging that she hadn't experienced in years. The world, which had often felt small and solitary, suddenly felt vast and full of unexpected wonders. Eleanor felt a deep warmth spread through her. Her heart, which had been tight with shock, now felt full. She looked at the faces in the crowd, some smiling broadly, others with tears in their own eyes. It wasn't just the 10 who had stayed with her. It was hundreds, all looking at her with such genuine respect and gratitude. The solitude she had grown accustomed to over the years, a quiet space filled with memories, suddenly felt different. It wasn't empty anymore. It was now connected to this vast, vibrant community. This wasn't just an act of kindness returned. It was an embrace, a welcome into something much bigger than she could have imagined. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a small, tearful smile touching her lips. The superstars didn't just leave after that grand thank you. Their gratitude was lasting. The next day, a team of professional snowplows, paid for by the WWE, arrived to clear her long driveway and the roads leading to her house. They even cleared paths around her property, making it easier for her to move around. Shortly after, a local contractor, also arranged by the WWE, showed up. He inspected her roof, her plumbing, and her heating system. He explained that the WWE had insisted on making sure her home was in perfect condition, especially after the blizzard. They repaired a leaky faucet she had been putting off fixing for months, reinforced a loose shingle on her roof, and even upgraded her old furnace to a more efficient model. It was all done without question, without her even having to ask. They simply told her it was the least they could do for their honorary member. Beyond the practical help, the superstars themselves kept in touch. The 10 who had stayed with her were the most frequent. They sent her cards, called her regularly, and even stopped by when their touring schedules brought them anywhere near her town. They brought her gifts, not expensive ones, but thoughtful things. A new set of gardening tools, when they heard she loved her flowers, a comfortable blanket for her armchair, a box of her favorite tea. She received messages from others too, superstars she had only seen in the crowd that day, expressing their continued appreciation. Eleanor, who had once felt invisible to the larger world, now had a steady stream of connection. Her mailbox, once filled mostly with bills, now held colorful postcards from places like Tokyo and London, signed by people who called her friend. The WWE organization also established a fund in her name. It wasn't for her personal use, as she had gently but firmly declined any financial gifts for herself. Instead, it was a community fund, specifically for helping elderly residents in her county prepare for and recover from harsh weather events. They called it the Eleanor's Haven Fund. It provided insulation upgrades, emergency generators, and food supplies to those who needed it most. It was a tangible legacy of her kindness, spreading her spirit of generosity throughout the community she loved. Eleanor took great pride in this fund, often asking the local coordinator for updates on how it was helping her neighbors. It gave her a new purpose, a way to continue giving back, now with the support of a global organization. Eleanor truly became an honorary member of the WWE family. She received invitations to events, though she rarely attended, preferring the quiet of her home. But she watched every show, now with a personal connection to the larger-than-life characters on screen. When one of her boys won a championship, she cheered louder than anyone. When they faced a tough match, she worried for them, as if they were her own grandchildren. Sometimes, during a broadcast, a superstar would look directly into the camera and say something like, "This one's for you, Eleanor," and her heart would swell with pride and affection. Her story, the tale of the elderly widow who sheltered 10 WWE superstars, quickly became a legend. It spread far beyond the wrestling community, picked up by local news channels, then national ones, and eventually shared across social media platforms around the world. It was a simple story, but a powerful one, about kindness, community, and the unexpected connections that can form between people from vastly different walks of life. It highlighted the power of human compassion, showing how a single act of generosity could spark a wave of gratitude and change lives. Eleanor's life, once a quiet, solitary rhythm of daily routines and cherished memories, was now intertwined with the vibrant, theatrical world of professional wrestling. She still enjoyed her solitude, her garden, and her books, but now those quiet moments were punctuated by phone calls from famous athletes, visits from grateful strangers, and the knowledge that her simple home had become a symbol of something good. She had shown tremendous courage and warmth that night, opening her door to strangers during a terrifying storm. In return, she received not just thanks, but a lasting legacy, a renewed sense of purpose, and a family that stretched across the globe. Her impact on the superstars was profound, reminding them of the humanity that existed outside the bright lights of the arena. And their impact on her was just as deep, filling her later years with warmth, connection, and the joyful realization that even the smallest act of kindness can echo through the world in the most magnificent ways. She often thought about her late husband, a wrestling fan himself, and knew he would have loved every minute of it. Her life was a testament to the belief that even in the face of the biggest storms, kindness always finds a way to shine through.